Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Into the Unknown podcast. And my name is Scott East. And this is Michael Jeffery in the yurt. And before we get into anything else, I'm going to lead a short centering exercise. And if you're in a place where you can close your eyes and connect inwardly, then I invite you to do so with us. So, closing your eyes, connecting to everything that's happening within you, and noticing the distinction between your inner world and the outer. Whatever you're up to 10 minutes ago is no longer happening. Whatever you were up to 5 seconds ago is no longer happening. I invite you into this present moment with the sensations that are in your body, with your physical sensations of your physical body, the emotional, the feelings you have, your emotional body, the energetic sensations, your thoughts. Simply noticing everything that's happening. Maybe it's choppy waters, like someone just threw a big rock into a lake. There's ripples. Or maybe it's all very still and calm. And as you're noticing everything that's happening, without trying to make it different, I invite you to become aware of your physical center of gravity. This is a point a couple inches below your belly button and a couple inches back towards the spine. This is your physical center of gravity. And I'm going to invite you to practice a skill that is often practiced in martial arts. This is called becoming centered. The distinction is that in addition to your physical center of gravity, you have an energetic center. This energetic center is mobile. For most people in modern culture, your energetic center, the energetic center is often located in the mind. It's a very mental centric culture that isn't so connected to feelings and subtler energetic experiences. So, but you can, with your attention, with your intention, you can move this energetic center. And my invitation to you is to, with your awareness, move it to the place where your physical center of gravity is, so that one is over top of the other. And this isn't a mental exercise. This is an experiment. It might be a strange experiment to you. I invite you to set your judgments of it aside and see if it can work for you. Notice what it's like to have your center on your center. So a martial artist begins at this centered position. And we're going to begin here too. So next, you can snap your fingers in a moment. And with snapping your fingers, I want you to create an energetic grounding cord between your center and the center of the earth, center of Gaia. It'll be a long, flexible tube. It'll have a color. And Michael and I'm going to invite Michael as well to, when we snap our fingers and declare it, to say what the color of the grounding cord is today, which can change. So my grounding cord is forest green.
Mine's a spiral of red, orange, and yellow.
Thank you. If you're listening and doing this, you can simply be aware of what yours is. Notice, even more important, the experience of being grounded. What is this for you to be connected to the earth consciously, energetically? And the energetics, they move both ways towards the center of the earth, and also earth can feed you through this cord too. And in a moment, also I'll invite us to click our clickers, to snap our fingers, to create for each of us a personal bubble. This will be an energetic bubble around your body. And the purpose of this bubble is to create a distinction between your personal space, your personal energy, and everything else, other people's energy, other people's thoughts, the past, the future. So invite us to click our fingers. Make sure, as you have this bubble in place, that there are no gaps in the bubble. And it can say a lot about where you're at in your life if you let people, if you have influx, or it's possible to have a bubble that's so thick nobody can get in, can't experience intimacy. It's also possible to have big gaps in your bubble so that you're not actually holding your boundaries. So the bubble will be about a foot away from your physical body. It'll just go all around you. And you might notice that inside of your bubble, there might be some energetic static or fuzz. The sensation that it needs to be cleansed in some way. So I'm going to invite you to use this other energetic tool. And for this, I'm going to ask you to reach into your bag of things. So you've got you can imagine you have a tool belt. On this tool belt is this bag. You can reach into the bag, and in this little bag are these golden pearls. So these pearls are made up of your essential energy. And I'm going to invite you to take one, drop it in through the crown of your head. And you can watch it float down as though it's floating down through water, slowly passing down from the crown of your head, down the length of your spine. And it's glowing, and it's offering this golden glow as it moves down this path of your spine, until eventually it makes contact with your physical center of gravity. From that point, I want you to see it as it expands outward from your physical center of gravity, outwards to the edges of your bubble. And as it expands outwards, it's going to push out the energetic clutter. It's going to push out other people's voices. It's going to push out the thoughts and sensations you might have about the past and the future. If you want, you can take another pearl and drop in if you feel like you need more of those. And then unlimited supply. The point is that you can use your intention and your awareness to clear out your personal space. So do what works for you to create this. And this is in my culture, my culture of practice. We call this first position. And we might not do this every time that we have a podcast. Maybe Michael will lead a different centering exercise at times, but in my culture, this is just like martial arts, being centered. We call it being centered. We call it the first position. And the distinction is that when you are connected to yourself in this way, when you're present, connected to your feelings, to your physical body, it's from this point and only this point that you can really live your life. So with that, I invite that we open our eyes when you're ready. We can come into contact and begin a different kind of podcast. And I want to say hello to you, Michael.
Hey, Scott. Thank you for that. That was wonderful. Oh, I was definitely feeling some ripples this morning, so it's nice to get back to this place of still, calm, grounded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I felt some fear as I was leading it, like, and some voices coming in, oh, what are people gonna think? They think it's weird. It's strange. And it's interesting to be with those voices and still go ahead and still be in connection, because I've yet to meet a person who's really earnestly tried that out and not had an experience that they benefited from. And I, for me, this is where this podcast begins. There's so many kinds of ordinary conversations that in podcasts and otherwise, that they begin from just a mental discussion or debate, or somebody talking about how they know things to be. And that's the culture I was born into, was the culture of that knowing things is what's most valuable. And I really want to create something different, create a possibility of an extraordinary kind of conversation, which I've noticed that you and I, when we just have friendly conversations, it tends to be extraordinary. And so that's part of it. So I want to share that with anybody who might be listening. part of my desire, and it's part of the inspiration for me anyway of how this began. It's just to begin recording some of our conversations that just happen to be extraordinary anyway.
Yeah, hopefully not too much pressure on. We might have the most boring conversation that we've ever had today.
Well, I mean, that's part of the unknown too, is being in this exploration, and maybe some parts will be boring. It's also, I think there's value in that too. So what's happening for you? What is there something in you that wants to be shared, or yeah, where do you want to go from here?
There's some things sitting with me from that meditation. The part that one part that I really enjoyed about that was this like reaching into my bag of things and pulling out the golden pearls, and then I was like, I pulled out like 3 or 4, and then I was like, oh, I like don't want to like use them all, like I don't want to waste them. And then later you said there's like infinite of them. So I'm just kind of being with that of how much capacity there is to be authentic. I can't remember exactly what you said the pearls were, but something about like my own like natural essence, energy, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
So just being with that, I've been putting out a lot of energy recently. Like quite exhausted. My nervous system's a bit overspent compared to the baseline I'd like to be at. So it's kind of going with this this concept of like I have some scarcity in my energy, but there's something about like having infinite pearls of my own authentic capacity, which is really resonating with like, even though my body's exhausted, my nervous system's quite tired. It's like if I tune in, there's a deep authenticity around that, and it's like there is infinite capacity to be authentic no matter what energetic state or financial state or emotional or relational state I'm in. Even though that might be depleted, there's like always capacity to be fully me with that.
Yeah, and I want to explore this a little bit, because what I want to propose is that if I get in touch with what my essential energy is, what my essence is, I might discover that, oh, I'm actually really tired. My physical body needs something I haven't been getting, which might be rest or food or something. And modern culture is such a do-centric culture. My partner, Paul Haniks, calls it do-itis. And so, especially in North America, there's this tendency to just push and never rest. And I found at times when I've done this meditation, I put the pearls in, sometimes I'll discover, wow, there's this whole new energy. I just thought that I was tired. And sometimes I'll just be wired, like on caffeine or stress or something. I'll put pearl in and I'll like yawn. I'll be like, oh, this is what's actually happening. This is what I've not been listening to. And that's what it is for me, is really being centered, really getting clear on what's really going on in me. And so this is, again, where I see extraordinary conversations beginning, is because it's from this place of, if you are authentically centered and I am authentically centered, we're both a little bit more clear about what's actually going on inside of each of us, then perhaps the exchange can be that much more real.
So what are you noticing? What's emerging from your being authentically centered right now?
I notice that when I'm speaking, I'm not trying to be right necessarily. I'm sharing my experience, and maybe somebody else has a different experience, and I'm open to that. But I'm it's like I can sense if I'm trying to be right in the conversation, then I've got my position, I've figured it out, I know where it is, what I'm saying is right, and I'm going to argue somebody else into the ground in order to stay right. But being centered, I don't need to defend a position. I can share what my experience is and hear what your experience is, and we can simply be together. And the extension of that for me is really like where I want to go with this is to share a bit more about what I want in this podcast, in this and future episodes, which are really simply conversations. Is what I really mean to say is what I want to have in my conversations with you. What I sense we already have is this respectful contact where we can explore the edges of conversations that are common in modern culture, topics that might be edgy or unexplored.
Mm,
But in ways where we exploring them in ways that we're connected to our feelings and
mm,
connected to the earth, and that we're both in our hearts and in our souls, and that we're, because we both got these big dedications in life, we're both doing these big things, and it's been a calling for a while. I think both of us have felt to do this podcast, and anyway, my sense is now I've kind of teased it. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share a bit about yourself and where you're coming from in life, if that makes sense for you right now.
yeah. I just wanted to riff a bit off the intention I'm hearing there of sort of like going together into this liminal space, into this like area beyond the edge, or on the edge of what maybe normal or comfortable, um, and how to do that in a good way. Like first I was getting an image of sort of like an astronaut, like kind of going out into space, like tethered to his oxygen cord in the spaceship, or like a diver going under the ocean into these places where humans can't actually exist yet, with our normal capacities. But there's so much to be discovered there. But a truer metaphor kind of feels like a plant seed, say a dandelion, where it's like rooted in earth, and then it develops this seed pod from the intelligence based in its genetics and its ancestry in the place that it's growing, kind of gets blown off into a new space to bring the earth and ancestral wisdom that it's carried, but express it in a new way, in a new place.
Mm.
But there's a risk in that, it's dangerous, it's hazardous. You don't know where the seed's going to get blown. You don't know where it's going to end up. It's going to end up in fertile soil, or is it just going to get eaten by something, or die, or end up on a rock and get cooked by the sun, or end up in water and drown. But there's something deeply true, exciting about that. Like, how do we blow off into spaces where we might not sprout, but have the potential to?
Mm.
And I could see each of these conversations being different seeds blowing off into the wind, and some of them might not grow, but some of them might hit somewhere that is actually very fertile. and brings more beauty in life for the future.
Mm.
Anyway, following that on this invitation to share a bit more about myself, I think I might have hit it a lot just in that last metaphor there. We're at a really unique time of existence, so much potential, so much resource, so much capacity in being a human being right now with access to all that we have. I'm really interested in how to go from where we are now as a civilization and as a planet, as a culture, moving forward to creating a world that's more beautiful. At the core, like how do I bring seeds of transformation to a more beautiful world from the organism or structure that's currently existing. And so there's lots of ways to do that. I've been doing Rites of Passage stuff. I own some lands where I have a lot of community living and we're gardening and practicing living in a more simple way that generates a lot of beauty just by being together and growing food and sharing time and spending time in nature together. And I've been doing psychedelic therapy training and just starting to step into that work too as sort of a modality to transform the current structures into more beautiful ones, and planting seeds with the psychedelic work paired with deep nervous system regulation and trauma-informed practice. And I'm also a dilettante. I have my fingers in a lot of things and have spiraled through a lot of different passions and interests over the years. And they all kind of inform this, how to bring the seeds of transformation to a more beautiful world. And those are the conversations I'm interested in having.
Cool.
How about you, Scott?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. I'm left, even though like I'm aware of more of the specifics of what you're up to and what that's like experientially, the experiments you're doing. And I'm left, and I imagine listeners will be left desiring to hear more specifically what it is you do. And maybe it's okay to just have it be a teaser for now, and to like let it naturally unfold. And
sounds great.
Where do I begin? First, I want to acknowledge, actually, and maybe this could have been done at the beginning. I'm not going to say should, because I like to be fluid with this, but I want to acknowledge the territory, the indigenous territory of, I was born on in the place now known as Calgary, Alberta. And the modern culture story, as far as my schooling system was concerned growing up, Calgary was just, it was a city that it existed, and it's the only thing that's really important to acknowledge existed on the place that's now known as Calgary. And I want to acknowledge that ancestrally in the past, before Calgary ever existed, and for thousands of years, the earth in that place now known as Calgary was a beautiful river valley. It still is a river valley, but it was home to many more trees, many more beautiful animal species like beavers and magpies and trembling aspens and buffalo. And there were no fences, and there were no roads, and there were no farms. And the humans who lived and roamed around this place, they still live here. They roamed much more freely, and they lived their lives. They're the Tsuut'ina Blackfoot Nation, and so I want to acknowledge their existence. I want to acknowledge the existence of the Indigenous people. And the place where I currently reside is known as Bowen Island. And this is the ancestral territory of the Squamish people. And its place name is Nechlelahan. So I want to acknowledge that first. I want to acknowledge that where I come from in life is many places. I have many sources of inspiration for my life. Where I come from ancestrally is not this place. And there's a long legacy of colonization that my ancestors participated in coming to this part of the earth. And where I stand in life is this crossroads where I'm at the edge of modern culture, because I see modern culture as a culture that views itself as the best thing since sliced bread. And it sees itself as the only game in town. There is really only modern culture, and then that which has not become modern culture yet, that which has not been incorporated and assimilated into modern culture. And this is what has caused the genocide of the Indigenous people to the point that it has. This is what is still ongoingly causing the ecocide of the earth. And so I stand at the edge of modern culture with other edge workers like you. And I think those listening to this are edge workers if they're listening to this, probably. And I'm an experimenter. I stand at the edge of modern culture. I explore the question of what else is possible than this. How do I shift my life so that I'm in alignment with the principles of Gaia, much like the Indigenous cultures ancestrally have been? Like Indigenous culture is this culture that in its essence, in ancestral times, Indigenous cultures are 100% compostable. It's just nothing that they don't, there's no like space age polymers that are created from fossil fuels to, or in order to live. It's a very relatively low impact culture. And we're so far beyond that. And so as somebody standing at the edge of modern culture, I am, I'm part of this new kind of culture, and the culture is called possibility management. And I'm a possibility management space holder and trainer in training will always be a trainer in training. There's never a time when a trainer is not in training. And I hold space for other people to explore what it means to be an edge worker, to be a village weaver, to be an evolutionary, a builder of new worlds for other people to play in that are different from modern culture, and an earth guardian. And this is where my conversation starts. Is I am, and I want to also acknowledge too that my partner, Paulinique's surname is Indigenous, and she comes from the Haisla First Nation in the place now known as Kitimat. And it matters. I'm at this, there's a crossroads in me that I'm always at this edge of what can I create? Because one part of me wants to just become Indigenous again. And at the same time, modern culture has had such a thorough impact on the planet that Indigenous technologies, as they were in ancestral times when my ancestors were Indigenous, Celtic ancestors, the strategy of Indigenous culture, it doesn't have all the tools that are needed to contend with the impacts that modern culture has had on the planet. So something new needs to be invented. New things need to be invented, as well as going back and rediscovering the very low impact technologies. And I'm stepping into the unknown with this. It's scary for me to acknowledge that I don't know. I don't know how. I don't know if modern culture, if humans will survive the next 50, the next 20, next 10 years, who knows? But I'm very pro-human, and I, at the edge of modern culture, I've discovered a lot of amazing humans with amazing qualities who are doing amazing experiments the experiments are below the radar of modern culture, that they're very real, and they're rehumanizing humans at a rate. And just so many people like you who I've met who are just at the edge and transforming and helping other people transform. That's where I'm coming from. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Scott. It gets me curious, as you've defined yourself so clearly at the edge of modern culture, and this deep connection with Poliniques as your primary human. It's like, I mean, I'm curious what you know about the nature of the edge of modern culture, and also how that's informed by Indigenous knowledge and awareness, and just maybe some of the themes or trends or nature of being in this unique place that you stand.
Yeah, thank you. I feel sad because when I consider this question, when I consider what's at the edge of modern culture, I immediately become aware of what has yet to be assimilated, what is yet to be assimilated by modern culture, what still stands a chance of enduring beyond modern culture's edges. an example would be old growth forests. There's 3% of old growth forests remaining on Vancouver Island. And these old growth forests, some of the trees might be 1,000 years old. It's like they're artifacts of the time before modern pressure. And there are very few artifacts like this that remain. Very few space holders for that memory of the time before modern culture. So I'm aware of these. There's these vulnerable aspects to the world, and there's a mode, kind of barging, trampling mode, that modern culture and its, by extension, the corporations of modern culture get into, which is it's a dedication to being in business as usual. And it's a dedication within culture that basically says resources are needed in order to live. I want to take a step back from this even and say, like, culture is what a human holds within themselves as a program. It is an operating procedure. It's about culture originates from how individuals within a culture are dedicated. And modern culture trains the humans within it through the school system and through its conventions to make decisions in certain ways, to interact with one another and with the earth in certain ways that create a certain kind of result. And the results that modern culture has created are not the only kinds of culture that the humans can create. There are different examples, like indigenous cultures, ways to create human culture. And so standing at the edge of modern culture means experimenting with not believing the assumptions of modern culture. That modern culture, in the way that it's got things figured out, is the best thing. And to begin feeling the pain of the impacts that modern culture has had, and to start doing new experiments. And when I go and visit my partner's indigenous culture, I'm really aware of the impacts that modern culture has had on her culture. And I feel fear to really talk about this at all because I want to be totally as respectful as possible. And so I'll just talk about it in the way of seeing, I see in indigenous people an example of an alternative to modern programming. I see how the conventions of the way that they share their feelings with one another, the way that so many indigenous people are in a way, not in a mental way, not in a way that they're telling a bunch of stories about themselves to make themselves seem really big. Just in a really simple way, they're so connected to the earth, they're so connected to one another. And so this is what it means for me to start creating a new kind of culture, is to shift the foundations of the way that we interact as humans, to start connecting with our feelings with one another in different ways, to grieve, to begin grieving the loss of the pristine earth in the way that it has been lost, and to shift into experimenting with different ways of gathering, different ways of interacting. I hope that that's not too abstract in what I've shared, too intellectual. I really want this podcast, just these conversations, to be less about me just sharing about what I think I know, or trying us like confirming our biases or something, and really just a lot of the time I'm just like, I don't know, man. I'm how do I do this myself? How do I feel? How do I grieve? How do I be real and be with others in a real way?
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, I need that too, a lot. And I think there's something about like having some way to make meaning about maybe what's going on generally on the planet right now, that kind of helps me to connect with people in a different way, like understanding what cosmology I'm running, like what mythology I'm living in, somehow like allows me to know how to show up with people and with my hours and minutes and my energy and how I'm showing up right now on the earth. Something that's coming up as you're speaking is one sort of belief I've been trying on, of when I look at all this like ecocidal tendency of modern culture, consuming the life force and biodiversity and species on the planet, acidifying the oceans and creating poverty all over the world. And anyway, any of the infinite amounts of things that are going on right now. One of the stories that's been somewhat supportive is like kind of looking at Earth as in this like, it's like I kind of see her as like a teenage girl in some ways, like going through this sort of initiation that involves self-destruction. Like a key part of rites of passage is this sort of dissolution and like breaking down of how things were, no matter how healthy or stable they were. But the dissolution and the breakdown is essential in order to transform into a new way of being. Like in one of the maps that comes from my main teacher, it's like a lot of like building up your ego for the first part of your life until you have a good understanding of who you are authentically, how to connect socially, just how to be in the world in a way that you can be stable and maintain yourself. And that requires like a development of a certain amount of ego so that you can navigate the world. But once you're well rooted and grounded in that, then you totally break it down. You totally break down the box of how you function. And that ego becomes in service of something greater that's much more mysterious and unknown. So if I kind of imprint that map onto like what's going on planetary, it's like maybe the Earth is breaking down its ego of this is how I can function in a healthy, beautiful way, but it's like I know I have more potential. And the only way to get there is to kind of break down how things have been, and something else larger and more mysterious can emerge. So maybe the cutting down of the old growth like death of thousands and thousands of species could perhaps be in service of something bigger, but perhaps these like internet technologies, like the modern technologies that are coming out of this particular age, have some sort of like collective potential to generate a consciousness that is actually way beyond anything that we could imagine, and is quite mysterious, and is super frightening from an earth-based animal perspective, but maybe from a larger spiritual consciousness perspective is actually somewhat genius. The reason I'm saying this is we're going into places of unknown liminal conversation, and I'm not sure how much I even believe what I'm saying, but there has been some solace in this myth of the earth as a teenage girl who's sort of like cutting herself or getting super fucking drunk, wasted, to discover where her edges are, and what her potentials are, and acknowledge that for maybe from a small human perspective, it's really hard. But maybe there's this bigger consciousness that the earth has. She created us. The earth created modern culture. The earth created the circumstances that are creating the destruction of so much of the beauty that she's created. And you need to trust that there's some sort of intelligence in that that's probably incomprehensible to any human. But the intelligence and the evolution is coming from the earth itself, so there must be some deep wisdom in it. I'm curious your response to that sort of, what that evokes.
I feel fear because there's a part of me that is being asleep and numb for so long around the pain of the earth. And I think I've done a lot of grief ritual work. I've cried a lot in initiatory spaces and in circles where people have held me, or trainings, and it's my sadness and my feelings, all my feelings have been so informative and helping me to evolve as a human. And there's this big, I've been getting feedback from my colleagues and my friends and mentors lately that there's this big sadness that I have that I've been numbing out totally. It's the sadness. It's the sadness of the destruction of the earth, of the really the loss of the future on planet Earth. And we don't know for sure that there is no future for human culture, but the more that I open to my feelings and I become more willing to consider the destruction that modern culture has had on the planet, the more it changes me, the more that I want to navigate to that sadness. I want to navigate to the fear and the anger that I have about the effect of modern culture on the planet. And my fear, I don't want to come from this, create some kind of a war with you around this. It could be that there's more for me to discover and learn about in what you shared. And my fear is like, if I buy into that mythology, that it will continue my numbing process. It'll serve this purpose of basically keeping me numb and keeping me not in my feelings, and and therefore, if I'm not in touch with my feelings, then I can't respond to the crisis. And I mean, to use the metaphor of young teenage girl who's cutting herself. It's like, how do I be a guardian for her? How do I be close and in contact with her in a non-abusive way, in a respectful way? How do I get through to her? And maybe it's, it's okay, it's already a more, as I consider this, it's already a more helpful metaphor than I first considered, because it's like, in many ways, I see the protests against modern culture as being ineffective. Like if I were to go up to such a teenage girl and be like, stop, you're wrong for doing that. You're wrong for harming yourself. You're crazy. What's wrong with you? It's like, that is just like, no, I would want that teenage girl, I would want to be a guardian against that influence to her, because of, yeah, just the extraordinary. I mean, I can't even imagine what it's like to be a teenage girl growing up in modern culture. Just the abuse for anyone, the abuse that's endured growing up in modern culture just is huge. And anyway, still my fear is there of becoming complacent, becoming numb. I want to be in touch with my sadness. And I don't want a mythology that says, that makes me, it's kind of like a feel good, warm and fuzzy sort of blanket over reality.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Thank you for naming those fears and the response. And yeah, I appreciate this like guardian reaction space, and what that evokes. And yeah, I highly agree with the not numbing. Like there's something deeply important about feeling powerfully. And my hope is this metaphor like also evokes that. Like it's deeply concerning to see one that we love harming themselves. And there's a lot of information in looking at the harm and feeling the harm about how to respond. Like in this case, I actually have some teenage girl in my field who is cutting herself right now. And what seems to be obvious that's at the root of that, like this person has like a really healthy, loving family upbringing, but there's a lot of birth trauma. And this seems to be a common thing of like birth trauma. It has some sort of like existential shame that leads to a lot of numbing, and the cutting is a way to like actually feel. So where to go with that is like there's something about like following the pain and the hurt, and like being aware of like deeply aware with all our capacities to feel and think and be and imagine and sense the destruction that is going on. And if we go deep enough into that pain, is like there's a lot of wisdom at the root of it. So it's very much about not numbing, but like actually feeling the pain more deeply, and that being part of the initiation itself. It's like this planetary destruction is going on as an invitation to look more deeply on how the human species can exist on this planet. And we need a certain amount of pain to actually feel that, because we're pretty comfortable in modern culture. So something needs to cut really deeply in order to help us actually bleed and feel and understand come in contact with the soul that's running underneath and through it all.
I want to acknowledge some fear I have of, I didn't watch the time closely enough. And so I do need to go. and I can stay for a couple more minutes. I hate that I have to cut this short.
We have all sorts of time in other weeks and other places.
I want to, before I go, thank you, and I want to acknowledge, before I go, just say, express what landed for me and what you just said, which is, it's this cutting deep thing. And there's a way in which I'm learning to express my sadness in a way that's not attacking. That's really valuable. And I still feel there's a high value I have in expressing anger. I still will continue to express my anger, but there's a way of expressing the sadness and expressing the fear I have. Like I might, like there's this phrase, it's like laying things bare. It's taking off my mask and saying, this is as bad as it is. And being present with the pain. Like I would be present with such a young girl as this. It's like, there is no upshot to this. She has been cutting herself. And there are ancestral examples of, say, tattooing or piercing as parts of ritual initiation, right? So perhaps such a thing as this kind of behavior of cutting herself is a desire for initiation. It's a call for being a part of a larger kind of story or context. And that's where I want to end. This is just saying there are other options if you're out there and you are in some way self-harming, or you feel the pain of the earth and you don't know what to do, that there are spaces for you that exist that you can navigate to, where you can explore the big feelings that you have. And I want to say that's what I'm available for. I don't know if, Michael, you're offering things, but I'm going to put my website in the show notes. And so it's bridgesnextculture.com. Michael, do you have a website?
I don't have a website right now.
Well, in subsequent weeks, Mike will have a website. I'll keep on him for that, because the world needs what you have to offer. And so we're both available one way or another for, I offer emotional healing processes. Michael, do you offer anything that people can contact you for?
Yeah, I've been doing somatic and wilderness based therapeutic techniques. I'm also just completing my master's degree and haven't launched my business side of things.
Thanks. We'll just make it that teaser for now, and people will have to tune in to hear the more detailed versions. But if you like this, what you've heard today, and you want to hear more, please let us know. Reach out to us. Give us your feedback about what you enjoyed, because it'll give us motivation to keep on doing this. And if you want to donate to us financially, that would be very helpful. I want to acknowledge our first donor who gave us $20, our first patron, Brianne Vaillancourt. And if you want to donate too, you can go to paypal.com/PayPalMe/BridgesToNextCulture. Send us I'll put that in the show notes too. I got to zip out of here, and thanks, Michael, for all who you are and where you're coming from, and for saying yes to doing this with me. I love you, man.
Love you too, brother. See you next
All
week.
right. Sounds good. All right, bye.
Bye.